Hey, what's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today we're taking a quick look at yet another version of the Civivi Elementum. And this one has the Tanto blade with that flipper deployment instead of the thumb stud, and then we have these black hand-rubbed brass handles, which I think look really nice. Also available in copper if that's more your thing. Both of them are going to have that same black hand-rubbed finish. And so I picked this up at Blade Show for about 50 bucks, which is cheaper than what you're gonna get it for online. But online you can find it for a hair under 70, and again, that's a little more than the original Elementum. I think it's worthwhile, for me at least, because you do get a nice step up in the handle materials. I like micarta quite a bit. G10 is okay in some instances, but I do feel like both brass and copper for me are a pretty big step up in handle material, and I feel like I'm getting a more premium knife when I get those materials, and so I don't mind paying a little bit more for them, although I got a pretty decent discount at the show. But worth noting. Now the other thing when we're comparing those materials, since we're comparing those materials, brass and copper versus micarta and G10, is both brass and copper are pretty heavy metals overall, so in comparison to micarta and G10, what we end up with is a pretty weighty knife. Now, I don't hate that. This brass version weighs in at 4.65 ounces, and when I get something in brass or copper, I'm expecting that weightiness. And so the extra heft, the extra sturdy feel of it makes it feel a little bit more premium to me and doesn't throw off the balance at all. Still feels really good in hand. Not adding that much difference in my pocket. If you're trying to save ounces, these probably aren't the best handle material, but I like the way it feels, so not going to knock it for being a heavier knife for its size. Now, other thing to mention with this black hand rub finish is it scratches pretty easily, and when it first scratches, it stands out like a sore thumb. It's super bright, and eventually what happens is you get more scratches and it blends in, and I think it ends up looking really good. So if I hit this at the right light, you can see this one's really scratched up because I keep it in the same pocket that I keep my keys in, but it's all kind of washed out now, has a pretty consistent look to it except for behind this pocket clip, and I think it looks really good. So I like that. I thought it was worth mentioning because I recently got a comment on something that was a material that I expected scratches on, but they were a little bit surprised that it was scratched, and so thought it was worth mentioning. This does scratch really easily, and if you don't like that, obviously not a great handle, but I think it washes out really nice, just like titanium. You get those snail trails on titanium and it eventually all blends together, and I think the same thing happens here. The blade has a coating on it. I believe it's a black wash coating, maybe it's just black wash now, and I do like the look overall of that black wash because I'm not a huge fan of their black coating usually. It's just kind of has a cheaper look to it sometimes, and I think this one looks pretty good. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it came like that. I don't think that's really all from me. Maybe it is, I don't know, but pretty sure it came like that. We do have the Tanto style blade instead of a drop point that we get on the original, and for me, it's not necessarily an upgrade, but I'm happy that I got this one because it's just a little bit different. I don't normally buy a lot of Tanto blades, and so don't mind getting a little bit of variation. I have a lot of knives, it's nice to get variation, so not something I would normally pick out, but I do end up liking that it has that Tanto blade, just a little bit different than all of my other Elementums. And I should note that I picked this brass one over the copper. I think both look really good, but I picked this one because I have the mini Elementum with those same handles, and so figured it made sense to match up that pair. Now dimension-wise, this is going to be pretty similar to your original, besides the weight. Obviously this one weighs 4.65 ounces, but everything else is pretty similar. We have a 2.96 inch blade, which keeps you just a hair under 3 inches. With that nice generous sharpening choil, we end up with a 2.625 inch cutting edge, 4.03 inches on the handle, which is fine for me. You end up getting a 4-finger grip on here, just barely, or I do at least, and you can see that's a little bit cramped. What I tend to do is choke up and get my finger on that flipper tab right behind that sharpening choil. Now that's not an intended finger choil, but it works really well for me. I've never had issues where I slip up on the blade, and it gives you just a more comfortable and spread out grip that ergonomically to me feels significantly better than staying behind that flipper tab, so that's usually where I'm living. Now, one thing I will note with the Ergos, pocket clip sticks up a little bit. That's true of the other ones as well, but pocket clip sticks up a little bit high for me, so Quick cuts, don't feel it at all. With a little bit of use, you start to feel it. I wouldn't say it's like a hot spot, so to speak. I guess more of a warm spot. You just become aware of it after a while. So not horrible, but it is just sitting a little bit higher than it needs to be. If it were a little bit flatter, I don't think you'd feel it. But one of the reasons you do feel it more is because this is a nice deep carry pocket clip and really doesn't show anything sticking out of your pocket, which is nice. And so non-reversible though, so this is going to be righty only, unfortunately, and does have a lanyard hole. Don't use it, but nice placement on that lanyard hole. Don't mind that so much. And overall, just a comfy knife to use. It comes in at 6.99 inches, which is just below the threshold of what I would consider a small knife. Anything under 7 inches, I'd say 7 to 8.5 inches is probably your medium-sized knife, and then anything over that, obviously a larger knife. And everyone's gonna differ on where they draw the line, but I still think this is a really nice EDC knife. Obviously it's 0.01 inches off of what I'd consider a medium knife, and so really usable, good size for EDC. Now, other than that, most of the other stuff's pretty similar. We have a D2 blade. Don't remember what the original was. That may be a step up in steel as well. But we do have a D2 blade with a nice hollow grind on it. And so overall, again, happy that I got the Tanto. It's not my first choice in blade shape, but don't mind getting them every once in a while, and don't have a ton in my collection. So is a liner lock. Not a crazy action. You probably notice that mostly I'm pushing it shut. It will somewhat drop and then you can shake it, but it's a little bit more shakes than I'd typically want in like a drop shutty knife. And so I end up closing it, but it's super smooth and feels good. Now the detent on that flipper tab is excellent, really dialed in, nice and snappy and responsive. So all good there. As far as the billboarding goes, really minimal, super impressed with that. We have the C for Civivi on the pivot. I don't really consider that billboarding, only because it's an upgrade over a tooled pivot. You either get a blank pivot, a tooled pivot, or a logo there. Might as well put the logo there of all places, keeps it from other places on the knife, and I think looks better than a tooled pivot. So don't really count that. The only other billboarding anywhere on this knife is really, really minimal. You might not even notice it, but if you look down to that flipper tab, we have D2 on the flipper tab, so nicely tucked away. Don't know that it was 100% necessary, but if they're gonna label it, might as well put it somewhere you don't see very noticeably. It's on the non-show side and very, very small, so barely noticeable. But overall, nice clean package. This is probably my favorite version of the Elementum that I have, and I end up with about 5 of these, which I should mention, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Elementum. I don't dislike it, but it was never one that really resonated with me. I think I was just a little bit behind. I picked up the Desert Warrior at one point just because I wanted the Desert Warrior pattern. I think that might have been my first one, and so they wouldn't ship automatics. That was the first non-automatic. And then after that, I got a couple in going gear. I got the Wii Elementum, and that's a flipper with a frame lock. I got the button lock, which I really haven't given a chance. I kind of wrote it off immediately as not a huge fan of it not having a second deployment method. And so I do need to give that one a shot. Really haven't carried it much, but this one's one that actually, goes in my pocket. I like this version quite a bit. Also have the mini Elementum, like that a bit. It's not a full-size EDC knife, so I don't really consider it in the same class, but this is one I actually enjoy carrying, so probably my favorite version of the Elementum that I have, at least. But would love to hear your thoughts on this variation down in the comments below. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification button. It definitely helps out the channel quite a bit, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.